Joining me now are two experts who've tracked the island for years. Dr. Sarvana Muthu, Executive Director at the Centre for Policy Alternatives in Colombo, joins me. And N. Ram, Director of the Hindu Publishing Group, who's spent years tracking Sri Lanka. I want to come to you, Dr. Sarvana Muthu, there in Sri Lanka. Is this now about getting the Rajapaksas out? That once Gotabaya Rajapaksa is out, completely out of power in a few days' time, that will result in the situation returning to normalcy, or is this a much longer fight in Sri Lanka?
Well, yes. I mean, the first thing that has to happen is that President Rajapaksa must send in his letter of resignation to the Speaker, and then the Speaker can take over and form the interim government. And that interim government, I think, should say that it will abolish the executive presidency by a two-thirds majority. That can happen in Parliament, and then set a date for the general election. And on the day of the general election, we can have the referendum with regard to the executive presidency being abolished. So there are a number of steps that have to be taken, and hopefully there will be a great sigh of relief when Gotabaya Rajapaksa hands in his resignation. So then we can work according to the Constitution and get ourselves back on track.
So is this from what you're saying, Dr. Sarvana Muthu, is this anger against the Rajapaksas and the manner in which they are seen, to quote some of the protesters, looted the country? Or is this just anger against the political elites of Sri Lanka who are seen to have got themselves divorced from the public, who are struggling at the moment, particularly because of the economic crisis?
It is both. It has a particular focus with regard to the Rajapaksas and their mismanagement, their incompetence, their corruption, and all of that. But it is also extended to the political class.
N. Ram, your sense, has this all taken you by surprise? Did you imagine you'd ever see scenes of the kind we've seen in the last 72 hours in Sri Lanka, the presidential palace being taken over by the public?
Nobody could have expected it. I certainly didn't. These scenes throw you back to the French Revolution, that sort of thing, except that the scale of violence has been a lot lower. And people have been, for the most part, peaceful and orderly. There have been some incidents which you would expect. But yes, this is a total surprise, the rapidity with which the whole political process sank. And I think the economic crisis has clearly been the driver of this. Rest has been added on, because that's what I think really brought about the downfall of the political establishment in Sri Lanka. To the extent that people don't trust most politicians, it's going to be a very big ask to be able to form some kind of stable, at least temporarily stable, all-party government. Because those actors who have played havoc with the system earlier are still at play. And the Rajapaksa, the people who have been in the Rajapaksa party, the SLPP, are still going to try a few tricks. That's my sense, unfortunately.
So are you seeing, Mr. Ram, that this is a prolonged crisis, that this crisis can only end when Sri Lanka first gets its economy back on track? It's not just about changing of guard in terms of political elites. It's also general elections, yes, but also a return to some kind of economic normalcy.
Yes, and for that to happen, I think there must be a credible all-party government in force, which is not, where people are not quarreling with each other, they're not playing tricks, where the focus is entirely on, it's not going to be easy to normalize this economic situation, I think, because there's the deep debt, complete trap, the default, the rising prices, hyperinflation, all this, it's going to take a while. But for things to improve, I think the international institutions and donor countries and the creditors will be looking to some kind of credible arrangement. So that will have to be put in place. I don't think elections can be held in the near future, or even in the, it's going to take quite a while. Elections will not be the answer. It's providing relief to the people, bringing about a certain stability, or at least arresting the fall of the economy, I think is going to be crucial. And, those steps can be taken only when a credible all-party government is in place. That's the problem here. So there's not going to be any easy or, it's going to take quite a while to bring this about. And I hope India can contribute constructively to this.
I'm going to come to that Indian question in a moment. Dr. Sarvanama Muthu, should India, from a Sri Lankan point of view, do you believe India's approach is the right one? We've said we support the people of the country. We've completely not taken sides when it comes to either the Rajapaksas or the Wickremesinghes or indeed the politicians. We've said we stand with the people of the country. Is that something that you believe is the right approach? India has also, over the last few months, provided aid to Sri Lanka. Does India need to do more in your view?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think the position of India saying that it supports the people rather than any government or any party or anything like that is the absolutely right one. And without Indian assistance, something like $3.5 billion in the last couple of months has kept the country afloat to the extent that that was possible. No, so India perhaps could do more, and I think that is something that we need to look into as far as the economic dimension is concerned. But certainly, as far as political stability is concerned, India's position saying that they are with the people as opposed to any particular government, I think is the right one.
And Ram, do you also agree that has India done enough? As Dr. Sarvanama Muthu was saying, India is focused on providing economic aid. Is that, to your mind, enough? Jai Shankar, the External Affairs Minister, said, look, this is Sri Lanka's problem. Sri Lanka has to sort out its own problem. It's an internal problem of Sri Lanka.
Yes, I believe, Rajdeep, that is the correct policy, and this has been laid down for quite a while, and I think the way India has responded to this crisis has been very sound, helpful, but not intrusive. And I think it's the right policy to follow, but I think we can step up aid. Whatever India can afford, I think we should. But that will not happen until a credible all-party government which is functioning is in place. So I hope that we can provide some more support to the 3.5 billion. I think this is the largest quantity of support that has been provided in this crisis. I think we can do a little more, but that, you make sure that doesn't go down the drain.
Let me ask a contentious question that's coming up. Are there lessons from Sri Lanka that perhaps India or certain states in India or indeed the center can learn? There are those who will say that it's an example of what dynastical family politics can do, what cronyism can do. At least that's what various people are suggesting. Others are saying Sri Lanka is an example of what a kind of hyper nationalism or this strong ethnic chauvinism can do to destroy a country, or authoritarianism of a form. Do you believe any of these are valid, Dr. Sarvanama Muthu? Have Sri Lanka's politicians been responsible either through family Raj or autocracy of the Rajapaksas for what has happened?
Oh yes, I mean the nepotism, the cronyism, the bringing in of the military serving officers and former officers directly into government. But I think the real question here is, irrespective of whether they are from the same family or not, it's a simple lack of credibility, of competence to govern. They've made huge mistakes. They have sort of feathered their own nest, and the tax cuts that happened in 2019, the move overnight to from chemical fertilizer to organic fertilizer, the refusal to go to the IMF, the paying of to creditors and dipping into our foreign exchange reserves so that now we don't have any money at all to import the essentials. All of those things are there peculiar to the Rajapaksas. But one thing must be said is that the Rajapaksas have come to power based on their subscription to a very strong, singular, majoritarian and authoritarian type of politics. They get their legitimacy, or they got their legitimacy, from those in robes and those in uniform. And that is something that needs to be watched out for.
A final word from you, Ram. Do you believe that this is an example of what family politics, cronyism, along with authoritarianism can do to a society, along with ethnic chauvinism?
Rajdeep, I would think that authoritarianism must share the greater must have a greater share of blame here, or responsibility. And in Sri Lanka, as many people have said, this executive presidency is a curse. Earlier, I think some sections welcomed it because it looked like decision making would be coherent and all that. But over time, it has been proved that the conversion of a parliamentary system, however flawed, to an executive presidency where all powers are concentrated in the hands of the president, I think that has let them down in a big way over the years. Of course, they've got to get rid of it. I think there's a consensus is emerging that must happen, but still, these steps, you shouldn't be tripped up along the way when you dismantle this whole system, this curse of the executive presidency, because it does not, it makes authoritarianism much worse. If we talk about authoritarian tendencies in India,
that's right.
You have to go to Sri Lanka to see what it really leads to.
N. Ram and Dr. Sarvanamuthu, as always, for educating our viewers, enlightening them with your wise words. I appreciate both of you joining me here at the top of the news today. Thank you very much for joining me on the top of the news.